American workers taking part in the so-called Great Resignation, implying that there is a great exodus of teachers. But the only data that article references is that RAND survey saying people are thinking about quitting. American workers taking part. By February, this article from Newsweek says America's teacher exodus leaves education system in crisis, right? And the data that they cite in the article, again, is that RAND Corporation survey from a year earlier that says people are thinking about quitting. But their headline is, the teacher exodus leaves the education system in crisis. And if you read on in the article, they actually spoke to someone from Fairfax County about the teacher exodus. And that person said, teacher retention rates have held steady and we have not seen a significant attrition rate. We are currently less than 1% shy of being fully staffed. That is the data they actually reference in a headline that was America's teacher exodus leaves education system in crisis. Just last month, The Hill published a story that said, teachers are quitting in droves, appreciate them before they all disappear. Now, in this article, they say data from across the country indicates that teachers are leaving the profession at a faster rate than before. And in the article, the word data is a link. So you can go look at the data that they're referencing. And if you click that data link, it takes you to a story from Denver ABC 7 that says district data suggests teachers are leaving the profession in unprecedented droves, just like the article said. But if you read that article, what it says is nationwide, there's not a single database that tracks this information. And the one person who they spoke to said, he's not convinced teachers are quitting in unprecedented droves due to the pandemic. Now, the article also went on to say that there were higher vacancy rates in Texas and the rate of retirement in Michigan was up, but retirement rates are not the overall teacher attrition, right? And vacancy rates are not necessarily equal to teacher attrition, right? Especially in this school year. So over the last year, US Ed has dumped hundreds of billions of dollars into education, right? And so in this time period in particular, you could have a whole lot more positions created without the bodies to fill them, increasing your vacancy rate without losing any more teachers. So case in point, in LA Unified in Los Angeles, a report came out from the Partnership for Los Angeles Schools called Closing the Equity Gap in School Staffing. And they said that LA Unified had over $6 billion in state and federal relief funds. And they used part of that money to create 7,000 new positions. Now, in this report, they said, unfortunately, half of these positions remain vacant 3 months into the school year. So this is a case in point where you could have 3,500 new employees while increasing your vacancy rate because you couldn't fill the other 3,500 positions. So the fact that you see vacancy rates going up in and of itself does not tell you anything about whether or not teachers are actually leaving. Now, I can't tell you from this information whether or not LA is experiencing increased teacher attrition, right? But I do know they have higher vacancy rates because they've created more positions. So while we've seen no evidence that there is a massive exodus of teachers during this school year, like what is happening in CCSD, we do see an issue with teacher morale and would expect a higher than average teacher attrition to happen between this school year that's just finishing up and the start of the next school year. So what that means is this will make teacher recruitment more competitive than ever, right? So over the last decade, the teacher pipeline has shrunk by over 30%, right? There's 30% less people completing education preparation programs than there was a decade ago. In Nevada, we rely on over 60% of our teachers to be trained out of state. So as that pipeline's shrinking that we so heavily rely on, and as those other states are also having trouble finding new bodies, whether they have a teacher exodus problem or not, all of this is going to make it more competitive and difficult to find new teachers for the next school year. So the work that lies ahead. So the report that we provided to the committees last year was essentially a snapshot in time on what was happening with Nevada's teacher workforce, what were the class sizes that students were experiencing, and what we're trying to do moving forward is to build systems that allow us to investigate what's happening with class sizes, student experiences, and the teacher workforce in essentially real time. Right. So strategic questions that we would like to be able to answer, almost immediately would be things like, what is happening with Nevada's teacher workforce right now? What are the class sizes our children are experiencing right now? How many students have a long-term sub right now? What does the teacher pipeline look like right now? And what obstacles do we face going forward? So how will we make it a reality that we can essentially answer these questions in real time? Some of the work that we'll be doing for the Department of Education is building the data infrastructure to make this possible, right? So one of the things that we'll be working on is connecting OPAL, which is the teacher licensure system, with Infinite Campus, which is the student information system. So essentially, we can start to say how many students actually have access to a teacher who is a full-time teacher, who's licensed in their subject area, who has experience in that. Right now, without that connection, we can see there's a person's name there, but we have no way to know, is that a long-term sub? Is that a licensed teacher, right? So those questions right now are very difficult to answer in essentially real time. Another thing that we'll be working with the department is to create a statewide course catalog. So essentially right now, every school, district and charter school can use Infinite Campus in the way that they want. And their naming conventions for courses have virtually nothing in common, right? Some schools might even just put the name of the course as the teacher's last name. And so even a simple thing like how many kids are in a math class right now is not something we can just simply answer. Right. So creating a statewide course catalog that essentially what we're not attempting to do is to force other places to change their catalog, but rather can we align your courses to this course so we know what is a math course, right? What is an advanced placement course and things like that. So we can start to answer questions about access to different coursework, to teachers' experience in those types of courses and things like that. And then finally, we'll be working to improve data sharing with NSHE. Right. So we've already met with all of the different NSHE organizations to talk to them about this project and things that would be helpful for them. And then also, how do we help the department get information on what is happening with the teacher pipeline? So things that we'll be, working to build into this project that to support NSHE, things that they've said that they would like to know, right, is what is happening with people who complete their programs? Like, are they retained in the schools that they stay? Are they retained in the state? What are the things that they're having trouble with so that maybe you can start to adjust your program to prepare people for those first couple of years of teaching when we see such high attrition rates. Right. So maybe we hear that it's a classroom management problem. So you're really focusing more on that in the prep program so that people are prepared for the first 2 years. So what some of this work will hopefully allow us to do and to share with other stakeholders is these reports and these charts and these graphs that were essentially a snapshot in time in the first report become essentially live databases, right? So charts like this where we're trying to look at what are the class sizes our students are experiencing, we could start to look at in almost real time and filter those charts by student demographics or school or subject area or whatever, topic of interest you're interested in kind of investigating. We'll be able to look at things like students' access to experienced teachers. And again, that could be something that you could start to filter out by student demographics or specific subject areas. We'll start to build things that help us kind of predict where we're going to have more demand in the teaching workforce. So what we saw in this chart was essentially what is the attrition rate of teachers by the age of the teacher, right? And so we know that once teachers hit the age of 55, the chances that they're going to be leaving soon accelerate. right? They're approaching retirement age, so more teachers are going to be retiring than maybe teachers in mid-career who are in their early 40s, right? So if we know that there are certain positions where there is an aging staff, well, now we need to communicate to NSHE to say, hey, these are really the areas we suspect we're going to have a lot of demand in the next 5 years, right? So the idea here is to bring clarity to Nevada education's most urgent issues through this work. So that is all I have to share with you today. Thank you so much for your time.
Okay, thank you very much. Always like when we can look at the question and actually look at the data to see if it supports that. So that's great. Thank you very much. Questions? Yes, someone, Thomas.
Thank you, Chair Dennis. And thank you for the presentation. I really do appreciate it. But I do have a couple of questions, and one is based on the data that you stated in the beginning, how you data insight is comparing Texas, Chicago, with the rate of teachers staying there. What I did not see is the why. You know, to bring up that data to say that teachers are staying in Texas at a slower rate than any other place, and Chicago the same difference. Why? Then we can compare it to why we are perhaps in Nevada losing teachers at a high rate. Does your data support that?
For the record, my name is Nathan Trenholm. No, I don't know why. And I also, again, to kind of go back to, those were reports that we could find, right? Again, there is no national repository of this information. And on top of that, there's no qualitative information to support what data we can go out and try and find. So there is definitely a shortage of quality data on the teacher workforce in this country.
Thank you. Follow up. All right. So then with that you presented to us, and we don't know the reason why, Texas or Chicago, so we can't compare those areas of why we have a lack of retention here in Nevada, if we do, because what I'm surmising from your presentation is that, with all these other articles that came about, that perhaps this is not true, that we, are not having a higher rate of teachers leaving our state. And that is concerning to me because, I'm sure the data shows that these teachers are not coming back. They've handed in their resignations. So I guess my question is, does your data support those findings that you quoted us as saying that the articles are incorrect, perhaps not giving us a full census of what's happening in our state in Nevada?
For the record, my name is Nathan Trenholm. I'm not sure I quite understand your question. The articles that I was referencing was to say, hey, we're seeing a massive exodus of teachers in the Clark County School District. Do we see any evidence that's happening elsewhere? Right, that is a national thing that we know is happening. We did not find evidence nationally that is consistently happening around the country. I'm not suggesting that any of the articles we found were, like, as far as like what's happening in Texas and what's happening in Chicago, that those are incorrect. The articles that's shaping the national narrative, they're relying on a survey of what people said they were going to do. So what was incorrect there is to assume that survey was data on what people actually did, right? That survey was not data on what people actually did. That was data on what people were feeling and thinking, right? And so there is, I would say, clearly a teacher morale issue in this country right now, right? And so some of the data that you just saw, I presented to a conference about 4 weeks ago in Boston for Harvard, where there was education researchers and leaders from all over the country. I shared some of the data that was in here, as well as other national data that we saw. And when I shared what was happening in Clark, there was an audible gasp in the room, right? And so there were people from all across the country, and the consensus of that room, again, I don't have data to back this up. I could just tell you the consensus of that room is there is not a national teacher exodus happening right now. There is a national teacher morale problem happening right now. So the kind of purpose there was this survey is shaping a narrative that survey was not meant to support, right? And there is no national data to contradict what people said they were feeling. What data we have is you can try and do Google searches and say, who's reporting this in real time? And that's what brought us to the Texas report. That's what brought us to, Chicago periodically reporting to the media throughout the year what their teacher vacancy rate was. So I hope I got to your question of kind of what the different purposes were of what I was sharing.
Thank you. I understand the different purposes. I just don't want, it seems like you're saying that the media gave misinformation out about the teacher exodus. And that's what my big concern is, that people listening to this may get the impression that we really don't have a teacher shortage in Nevada.
For the record, my name is Nathan Trenholm. We have a teacher shortage in Nevada. If I gave the impression that we don't, I didn't intend to. The issue is, in fact, I'm actually trying to relay the opposite, right? There are people who are saying, this is a national problem. There's nothing we can do about this. It's all the pandemic. And I'm saying, no, we have a problem here. Right? This is a problem we need to deal with, and we're not seeing it at the scale of what's happening. It could possibly be happening elsewhere. We just haven't found the evidence yet. We have the evidence. It exists and is happening here right now.
I appreciate that clarification. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Vice Chair Bill Bray, Axelrod.
Thank you. Thank you very much for this presentation. I pulled out your first flyer or whatnot presentation that shows that we have a teacher shortage and it's a problem. And then I appreciated you kind of going down the rabbit hole and very channeling your inner John Oliver, I sort of felt like. So thank you. Thank you for that. My question is, obviously, we want to know why. We know it's a morale. Are you suggesting, or has there been I watched as much as I can of the Clark County School District trustees. Have they talked about exit interviews? Are we capturing that why? I mean, I say it anecdotally, we know it's morale, but I've always been under the impression, and I think it's the correct impression, I haven't sourced my data, but that most people will, if they're appreciated, even if salaries are lower, if they feel appreciated in their job, that they'll stay. So I guess, we hear all the time, it's salaries, it's salaries, it's salaries. I don't know a single teacher who does what they do for their salary. And all the teachers I know, with the exception of very few, are dedicated, are there for the kids, are there for the right reasons. So that kind of went all over the place, but thank you. And anyone who doubts that we have a teacher shortage, it's right there. Thanks.
So for the record, my name is Nathan Trenholm. So I can't tell you exactly why, right? And so what I can tell you from the reports that we pulled from the board docs over the last decade is in those reports, what it lists is the teacher's name, where they worked, what their position was, when they started, when their end date is, and their reason for leaving. And so in their reason for leaving, there might be 15 to 20 options that they may be choosing from. And so it could be they're going to work in another district. It could be retirement. It could be they're dissatisfied with the district. So we don't have very granular information from that to tease apart. But I can tell you that the number of teachers who are leaving because they're dissatisfied with the district is way above what it historically has been, like way above. And then there's also teachers who have left to go work in other districts has spiked up, retirements is up. But as far as kind of getting to the granularity of action, we don't have that information from those reports.
All right, so we've got Assemblyman Miller, and then we will go to Senator Buck.
Thank you, Chair Dennis. Thank you for your presentation. This is where I have to take a deep breath in a moment, because since I came into the Assembly when I was first elected in 2016, this has been an alarm that I've been trying to set off the entire time, that we will run out of teachers. There will not be enough teachers, and that we will lose them. And you heard me today say there is no pipeline. The only correction I'd make to what you said about not having enough qualitative information about why teachers are leaving. There's about 40,000 people in the state that are happy to tell you exactly why, or why they're thinking about leaving. And I think you know that and appreciate that. Another alarm I've been trying to ring since I came into the Assembly is about class size. And even the very first page of this pamphlet with the class size recommendations came from a bill I wrote my first year, because I think you know, but I'm also a Clark County school teacher. And so coming in and realizing that one of the first issues is we didn't even have recommendations in the books of what a class size should be. So that's why when there were classes of 50, 60 kids, there was no parameters to say, oh, this is a problem. I'm grateful that finally there's going to be some work around some of the other class size bills that I passed in 2019. AB 304 required school districts to publish the actual class size numbers per class, which never happened. Because as you know, we look at class size averages and it gives an average, but it doesn't say that your child's in that class with 40 or 50 students. It also required that, because we know with class size reduction that schools could approach the Board of Education and ask for class size waivers. And even though they had discussed it as well, those things had been rubber stamped. That bill also enabled them to require that school districts include a plan of action on how they will deal with their class sizes, not just an automatic waiver. Last session in 2021, AB 266, also because I see it in your materials as well, that jobs should be, well, not exactly, but the law says that jobs should really be posted based on what's needed that would apply with those class size recommendations. So even when, that's why there's a difference between you say, oh, we're saying that there probably should be 10,000 more teachers, not just these numbers, because again, if you have the largest class sizes in the country, knowing that you'll put 40, 50 students in there is a problem. Also, the way that class size should be figured out, not including all licensed teachers, but just the actual classroom teachers, as well as, and I saw you referenced it in here, the link that one district put in to comply with AB 266 that isn't really robust or full compliance, because it's just a link of, again, we need to know how many classes are being led by full-time subs covering vacancies and ARLs as opposed to licensed teachers. And that data, I just looked it up, it hasn't even been updated since the beginning of the year. And we know that's changed, nor did it say which subjects, which classes, which schools, which students were impacted. This has been an ongoing problem. It's not new, it's getting worse. So I guess my question to you is, because there also are attempts, and again, I'm glad to hear that you're working with Infinite Campus to do some structural things around that. But when you're looking at it, because we know it's not just salary, it's also working conditions. We know it's not recruitment, it's retention. Has there been any considerations or any thought given to how these things are impacted when there's actually policy changes or laws made that aren't fully robustly implemented by either the districts, the schools, or even the department?
For the record, my name is Nathan Trenholm. So I'm not sure I quite understand the question, but a purpose of this would be to get to the answers to the questions you're asking, right? The report that CCSD has put up that I think you're referencing, right? There's a whole law like that they're supposed to report how many actual long-term subs do they have, and they have a report on their website that says whatever the bill is, right? Like AB
266, yeah, like it's just
266, and that just says 469, right? And that is not helpful to anybody, right? Like we don't know what was that a specific day? Was that how many worked at any point during the year? Is that high schools? Is that predominantly elementary schools? Is that predominantly special education? We have no idea, right? And so there is kind of the intent, right, of these laws where we need information that can inform us in like, are the actions we're taking to improve the experience of our students and our children, right? Are the actions we're taking actually improving those experiences, right? That's what we care about. We don't actually care about the number that they can aggregate and put 465, right? And so the idea here is to get to the intent, right? Who is being impacted by this? How are they being impacted by this, right? So is it the access to the teachers? Is it the class size in which they're sitting, sharing the teacher? And as we implement different programs, are we seeing the metrics change the way we intend them to, right? So whether it's, something to try and recruit teachers, maybe you're doing something to forgive loans for teachers, like, are we actually seeing more people apply? If you're doing something to increase morale, are we actually seeing, the percent of teachers who move schools or leave the profession, are we seeing that drop, right? And where are we seeing it drop? And where are we seeing it drop the most significantly? So if I understand kind of the questions correctly, right, like, the intent of this project is exactly to get to the point of like, are we providing information that actually informs and promotes discussion on, do we have clarity on where we're trying to go, and are we making progress to get there? Because so many of the reports, which you've already alluded to, right, like average class size, where, okay, we just took the number of licensed people we employed, we took the number of students we have enrolled, it's 21. Right, like, all right, I don't know what that means, right? You could simultaneously improve that metric, or that metric could get worse, and the experience of students could change, could not go in the same direction. So, for example, right, like you could have a grade level with 100 students and 4 teachers, and on average, everyone has a class size of 25. Well, if it turns out you're going to make a self-contained class with 3 students, now the other 3 teachers are splitting 97 students. And all of a sudden, that 25-1 is actually what kids are experiencing 33-1, right? And so the reality of the experience can be completely different from some reported metric where someone's trying to be in compliance by giving you a number. What we're trying to do with this is say, what are kids actually experiencing? And are we improving those experiences? Is that helpful?
Follow-up, Chair. Yes, and thank you for that, because that's exactly why those requirements are in there to get to the actual real, the reality of what's happening when we know it's opposite, when parents and students and educators are looking at the data and they're going, this is not at all what's occurring. But you're absolutely right. It's about quality, because it also depends on, you could go right next door to a different classroom, depending on the makeup of that classroom. It's not just about the numbers, absolutely. And I'd also like to say that it's not just Clark County, because Washoe also has, it may not be as extreme, the class sizes may not be as extreme, but also still outside of those ideal ratios. Our rural districts have a easier time in most cases just because of less students, but they can also experience that as well if they have staffing issues. So I guess my last and final question, I don't want to take up all the time, but when it comes to the work that you're prepared to do, that I would just really ask that you keep educators at the center of this work, because one of the biggest issues in education is that we're not listening to the actual licensed, skilled, experienced experts in the field. And, the people that are trained and skilled and experienced in it and doing it every day really have not just the insight, but often the solutions. I tell people regularly, when people are like, oh, we don't know what to do, we don't want to know what to do. I'm like, you can literally walk into any teacher's lounge in any school, because that's all they're ever talking about is what we can do to improve things. So I just would hope that you keep Nevada educators that are currently still there, in the field at the center, and make sure they have some role in this work.
All right, let's go to Senator Buck.
Hi, Nathan. Thank you so much for your presentation today. It sounds to me, at least from what I can allude, is that the RAND survey was completed by CCSD teachers, because they actually are leaving and following through with that. I'm just wondering, as far as these exit surveys, is it possible to do exit surveys through the Department of Education, because they have the list of teachers, their emails and that, in which we can get accurate information on why teachers are leaving in our state? Exit surveys would allude to maybe, is it discipline issues, increased behaviors, teachers aren't feeling safe? Was it the vaccination mandate where that threw medical freedom out the window for our licensed staff and licensed educators? Also, if it is class sizes, is there any information on what Florida has done in ensuring that there are lower class sizes in core coursework, and how that's increased student achievement? If it's salaries, is there any information on an analysis across the country from cost of living to teacher salary across the country? Maybe that is something that we could look at too.
For the record, my name is Nathan Trenholm. So to the exit survey, the Department of Education is, from my understanding, they have just completed the creation of an exit survey. And I think that now they're in kind of the planning phases of how they're going to roll it out and execute it. So she may be able to speak more to that.
Thanks, Jessica Todman, for the record, and my apologies for having to step away. Yes, that is accurate. And just as a preview, the Recruitment and Retention Advisory Task Force will also be sharing some recommendations and work we've been doing around morale survey, right? Because to Assemblymember Miller's point, there's a big difference between once you're already gone and how we could keep you while you're still here. So we're looking at both avenues of work because we think they're both equally important to retention and to improving the climate.
All right, any follow-ups? No? Okay, let's go up north. Anybody up north wishing to ask questions? Okay, not hearing from you guys. Okay, a lot of information. We appreciate your report today. Thank you for being here with us. Okay. Okay, we are now going to move on to item number 9, presentation of the Nevada State Teacher Recruitment and Retention Advisory Task Force, TTRA, the 2022 report and recommendations. I believe we have Tammy Smithberg, the chair, here with us. Or is she up? Oh, okay. And Carson, I see the reflection off the plexiglass.
For the record, I am Tammy Smithberg. Good morning, Chair Dennis. Well, actually, good afternoon. Good afternoon, Chair Dennis, Vice Chair Bilbroy, Axelrod, and honorable members of the Interim Legislative Committee of Education. I am Tammy Smithberg, Chair of Nevada for the State Teacher Recruitment Retention Advisory Task Force, and I'm a representative of the Elko County School District. The task force members are honored to have been provided the opportunity to engage in this work and to share our findings and our recommendations with you today. Today, I'm going to be sharing a presentation that provides an overview of the recommendations developed by the task force since our last presentation in 2020. Over the past year and a half, the task force worked closely with a variety of educational stakeholders, experts, the Nevada Department of Education team to create the very robust report you have today. The report contains the details and data on each recommendation, and I will refer to it throughout today's presentation. As you may know, the task force began with the passage of AB 276 during the 2019 legislative session. We were tasked with addressing the challenges of attracting and retaining teachers in the state of Nevada. Each even number year, we present a recommendation to you. The task force responsibilities are outlined in NRS 391.496, and we are looking forward to hearing your feedback on the 2022 report, and we'll be providing the updated report to the Legislative Council Bureau in February of 2023. This slide shows the requirements to become one of the 20 members of our task force. We have 7 members that have returned for another term and 13 new members as our appointments for this year. The group is diverse and includes members with a wide range of experience levels, grade levels, and subjects taught. Each district is represented per statute. We have 3 from Clark, 2 from Washoe, and 1 from each of the other counties. Task force met several times since February of 2021 to review the data and research and begin developing our recommendations. We knew that higher education educators, district HR personnel, and principals and teachers had developed work groups to address the challenges related to both recruitment and retention, and asked that they share their recommendations with us for their consideration. We accepted their recommendations and we worked to refine them and combine them where they were able to overlap. The task force members also formally adopted each recommendation before you today. It's good to know that many of the recommendations we had already developed and were in alignment with what our partner groups were also recommending. In the appendices of the report, you can review the recommendations that came from each of the group in detail. This slide provides an overview of the report's contents. We organized the report to help the readers easily navigate this information. A simple list of recommendations in alphabetical order by focus areas start on page 6. There are links within the document. If you click on the link of the recommendation, it will advance you to the full details in the report. All recommendations are numbered and sorted in alphabetical order. That way they are presented should not be construed as prioritization. This slide shows the anatomy of each recommendation. The task force would welcome the opportunity to work with you to develop more detailed costs, goals, and objectives for any of your recommendations you may be interested in advancing during the 2023 session. I want to highlight that each recommendation contains a link to a shared Google Doc folder, which you can find with relevant news articles, research, and data to support all of our findings. I will now share a brief summary of the recommendations by focus area. Please note that the details for all of these recommendations are found in your report. The data focus area consists of 4 recommendations that will either provide workforce data or ensure readily available data for legislators, NDE, districts, schools, and other educational stakeholders to use and to make informed decisions to positively impact teacher recruitment and retention. The details of each of these recommendations can be found on pages 8 through 10 of the report. Retention cannot be effectively addressed without knowing why the educators are leaving. And the recommendation is to provide funding for NDE to contract with a third party to develop, implement, and analyze the results to teachers when exiting their school, district, and or state, regardless of the reason of the exit. We were encouraged to see a legislative proposal for a statewide exit survey through Assembly Bill 418 during the last session, though it did not pass. This year's report includes additional details and clarification about this exit survey. We would like to continue to be actively involved in this process. The next recommendation is a study of educator workload. The recommendation is to commission a study to evaluate educator workload, including statutory and regulatory requirements. The task force believes that employee satisfaction is hindered by fatigue and excessive workloads. The study would provide clear information on the redundant requirements within statutes, regulations, and policies to reveal the true status of an educator workload in all Nevada districts and charter schools to guide the necessary changes to reduce the unnecessary workload. Such changes would enhance employee satisfaction and promote retention. Recommendation number 3 is about the need of a workforce data portal. The recommendation is that the legislator would invest funding to sustain the educator workforce supply and demand portal currently being developed using federal relief funds. Easy access to accurate, up-to-date data will improve the ability for NDE, NSHE, the legislators, schools, districts, teacher candidates, and educators to understand the challenges and opportunities related to Nevada's educator workforce and make decisions accordingly. Funding will be used to support the ongoing development and training for a number of the data portals. The next recommendation is about working conditions. The working conditions survey was recommended in 2021. The recommendation this year is to actually allocate funding for NDE to contract with a third party to develop, implement, and analyze a statewide working conditions survey to current employees. The 2022 task force reiterates that we are not only needing to understand why teachers leave, but waiting to find out why they are exited. It's too late. As a state, we need to take a proactive measure to gather the data to prevent the teacher loss. Some of you may be thinking, but don't we already have a climate survey? Why do we need a working survey? Well, actually the task force, we asked these questions as well. And we did a crosswalk between Nevada School Climate Survey and those found in the North Carolina Working Conditions Survey. We found actually only a few questions about a teacher working condition are even included in a school climate survey at this time. A climate survey addresses topics including physical and emotional safety, relationships, cultural and linguistic competence. A working survey includes topics such as administrative support, time spent on our job-related tasks, quality of facilities and resources, and access to relevant professional training. They measure two very different sets of perceptions. A valid and reliable teaching working conditions survey implemented every other year can actually provide a complete understanding of how teacher working conditions affect student achievement and teacher retention. In order to ensure that every educator has supportive environment necessary to help our students achieve, we need to know what are those working conditions actually are. Recommendation 5 and 6 can be found on pages 10 and 11 of the report. The next focus area is messaging, branding, and transparency. The recommendation is to allocate additional funds to NDE and districts for frequent public branding messaging that promotes recruitment and retention of educators via advertisement with social media, news outlets, etc. Task force is again recommending that as a state, we make a perception of teaching profession a priority. Consistent positive branding and messaging favorably impacts public perception and will help all Nevada districts to attract top talent. These funds would be used to support the creation of professional quality videos, public service announcements, and social media posts to promote recruitment and retention in Nevada. The other recommendation in this focus area is the Nevada Aspiring Educators Initiative. The recommendation is that the legislator would invest in a series of events and supports for aspiring educators, specifically pre-service educators or potential future educators. This is distinct from the current mission of the Nevada Department of Education, districts and schools, and institutions of higher education, as it focuses on those that are not already enrolled in the preparation program or those who do not already hold a license, who would benefit from a tailored information and mentorship as they consider pathways to careers in education. When someone's considering a teaching as a career and researching which path is best for them in Nevada, the task is actually really daunting with multiple groups, programs, and services to actually navigate through. A single hotline for support where future teachers can call to have all their questions answered, from financial aid to course load, from certification requirements to resume assistance. This would significantly help candidates navigate becoming a teacher in our state. Our next focus area is removing barriers. All the recommendations in this group aim to address barriers to entering the profession that we know from available quantitative and anecdotal data and are affecting our workforce. Recommendations 7 through 11 can be found on pages 12 through 16 of our report. Recommendation number 7 is to allocate funding for the Department of Public Safety to support prioritization of public background checks for educator licensure. The next recommendation is that the legislator would invest through an increase of funding to education to support the initiatives, programs that are currently being funded through the state and with federal ESSER funds, which include but are not limited to support for tuition scholarships, clinical experience stipends, and other costs related to education preparation, which may include the cost of assessments required for licensure. The cost of tuition is increasing and is a barrier into getting high quality, diverse candidates into educator preparation programs. The proposed solution is to continue to support the state funded programs such as Teach Nevada scholarships and provide ongoing support for ESSER fund initiatives like the Incentivizing Pathways for Teaching. Recommendation number 9 is to provide funding to create and manage a zero interest loan for in-state tuition for teacher preparation programs. This recommendation actually addresses the need to increase the number of students enrolling in the education preparation programs. The legislator would create a zero interest loan program for students to attend an in-state teacher preparation program to be paid back by teaching at a public school in Nevada. For each year the teacher stays in the classroom, a portion of the loan is actually forgiven. Should the teacher leave before full repayment, they would owe the remaining balance, but at zero interest. This should not be confused with recommendation number 12, which addresses the student loans already being paid by current classroom teachers. Another perceived barrier is actually the Praxis Core Academic Skills for Educators test. The recommendation is to address, this is the legislator would not, they should commission and fund a study of Nevada's licensure requirements, including the Praxis Core Academic Skills for Educators, to identify whether it's a barrier to locally growing a more diverse educator workforce and to ensure the competency requirements are reasonable indicators for candidates' future effectiveness as an educator. We do want you to know the task force doesn't want this test to just be removed as a requirement at this time. We feel strongly that teacher quality expectations needs to be maintained. However, there is enough anecdotal evidence to suggest that this test may actually be a barrier to licensure. The study is needed if Nevada is to make an informed decision regarding this exam. The cost and availability of housing has been discussed often in our task force meetings. Our recommendation is for the legislator to provide state general funds to supplement the current funding structure to support the Home is Possible for Teachers program. The Home is Possible for Teachers program does not currently receive any state dollars. They are fully fee funded, which limits the program's ability to impact educators on the larger scale. Providing dedicated funds will allow the Nevada Housing Division to not only increase the zero interest loan amount for down payment assistance, but will also increase the number of teachers they can actually award to. The next focus area found on page 16 and 17 of our report is all about salary, compensation, and benefits. Recommendation number 12 is providing funding outside the general fund to create and manage a student loan forgiveness reimbursement program for teachers after they've taught at least 5 years in a public school classroom in Nevada and who continue to teach in classrooms in Nevada. This loan forgiveness program would be dedicated to state grant funds to reimburse currently employed public school teachers for payments made on student loans. The task force recommends setting a yearly maximum per teacher amount in conjunction with a lifetime cap on funds for each teacher so that of what they could receive. This is different from recommendation number 9, as this is for those already teaching. An additional solution could positively impact both recruitment and retention is actually to increase our PERS benefits. The official recommendation is actually to implement PERS incentives such as, but not limited to, 90% after 30 years of service. This would equalize the benefits for all educators. One of the ways to potentially address the intent behind this recommendation is to increase the multiplier used to calculate benefits and make the years of service requirements the same for all educators. Currently, there's actually 3 different sets of benefit rules. For example, for the members enrolled prior to 2010, the multiplier is actually 2.5 for years prior to 2001. After 2001, the multiplier is then 2.67. For members enrolled between 2010 and 2015, the multiplier is 2.5. But for members enrolled after July 1st of 2015, the multiplier goes down to 2.25. The task force realized that this is a very complex issue and would look forward to a further communication and conversation regarding this recommendation. The last recommendation in this focus area is to allocate additional funds to implement a statewide minimum salary scale for licensed teachers to include an annual cost of living adjustment in line with the cost of living indices. The purpose of this recommendation is to increase teacher salaries and to ensure that teacher standard of living is maintained or improved. The data included with this recommendation shows the continued decline in Nevada teacher salary compared to other states when adjusted for the cost of living and regional inflation. Nevada started out ranked number 8 in the nation for teacher salaries in 1970. And now we're in 2021, we were ranked number 40. This means that a teacher in 1970 had a much higher standard of living and purchasing power than a teacher in 2021. Nevada's teacher salaries have not kept pace with the cost of living.
Oh, there you go. It's going up now.
The last focus area for recommendation is the strategic use of funds. This can be found on pages 18 through 21 of our report. One could argue that all the recommendations are about the strategic use of funds. However, recommendation number 15 is that the legislative should invest in expanding the ability of CTE teaching and training programs in Nevada's high schools, including covering dual enrollment tuition for students and potential staff support at NSHE institutions to sustain partnerships related to the program about expanding Nevada's Grow Your Own program. This is crucial to increasing the number of students entering and graduating from teacher prep programs. If Nevada's going to have a diverse educator workforce that meets the demands of our student population, we need to actively recruit our own students to the profession by supporting and increasing access to teacher training and career and technical educational programs. Number 16 was actually recommended by all the stakeholder groups. It's a compilation of solutions to recruitment and retention that needs to be adequately funded and flexible depending on the needs of each individual district. The recommendation is to increase the allocation of funding to education and prioritize the use of the funds. For administrative professional learning, to provide targeted training for administrators and building systemic support for educator efficacy and increasing job satisfaction. The hiring educators and specialists to provide essential wraparound services to students, to develop or sustain mentor programs in which experienced teachers build the skill development of inexperienced teachers and their own leadership skills in the process, to support district-led affordable housing rental assistance to educators, to support district-led recruitment and retention efforts that would include additional personnel or other resources to help build district capacity to effectively recruit, retain teachers, and support educator pipeline, retention incentives, career ladder options, and other resources. The task force wants to thank the numerous presenters and content experts, work groups, NDE, and WestEd. We stand ready to assist in the implementation of any or all of these recommendations and look forward to collaborating to positively impact the recruitment and retention of teachers in Nevada. Thank you for your time. I'm available for any questions. We also have staff from NDE to help answer questions as well.
Great, thank you. A lot of information, a lot of suggestions. Any questions? Yes, Councilwoman Miller.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Chair of our Nevada State Recruitment and Retention Task Force. Outstanding presentation. Thank you so much. I am very impressed with especially this just really being the second cycle of the task force, but really impressed with the work and just what you all came up with. Again, that's why I support having educators at the center of coming up with the solutions, because you are the experts. Excellent work. My question, I have a couple questions, just wondering, because I wasn't able to participate in any of the meetings this cycle, is one, if the issue of licensure fees came up. So not just the testing and requirements for educators to obtain their license, but the fees, because I started doing some research lately and saw that educator fees compared to other professional licensing fees in the state, again, a little out of whack when it comes to other professions where the professionals even make more money than teachers. So I was wondering if the license fees ever came up, and also with because even going back to what one of my colleagues said earlier about it's not always teacher pay. We know it's teacher working conditions and workload. And of course, teacher working conditions are students' learning conditions. So with the survey or work you plan to do around teacher workload, and you talked about redundancy, but will there be a specific focus to, because I know myself as an educator, I could give you a list right now of at least 20 things that have absolutely nothing to do to enhance or improve student academic or social development, but is required. So will there be a focus and an emphasis on those things that not only are redundant, but absolutely have no impact on students' academic or social learning or development?
This is Tammy Smithberg for the record. Working conditions survey, to answer that question, the focus was class size, PDs, how well our schools are looking. Working conditions survey, we were talking about feelings, opinions, perceptions. So I would hope that we would be able to nail some of that down as well. And then to answer your question about the price of licensure, yes, it was bounced around and talked about in several of our meetings.
Follow-up, Chair? And so it was discussed, but just not consensus to present it as a recommendation? Okay, thank you. For those who can't hear, the chair is nodding her head and giving us a thumbs up. So, okay, it just.
This is Tammy Smithberg again. To clarify, we talked about it. We all agree that it's something that needs to be looked at, and we wanted to start somewhere.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Other questions? About up north, anybody?
Anybody?
This is Senator Don Darrell Loop. May I make a comment?
Yes, please go ahead.
Thank you very much. And it really is a comment. Thank you so much for this work, because being someone who spent 30 years as an educator, some of these things have and ideas have actually been around, right, for a long time. And they weren't acted upon for lots of reasons, sometimes good reasons, sometimes reasons that, you know, weren't so great, but we do know that it's impacted. We also know that in my experience that teachers who are listened to and valued with these suggestions are more likely to stay, right? And so when you talked about, and I agree with the Assemblywoman, you know, when you start talking about how much schooling you have to have, and I was kind of under another system other than what's going on now. And you could not make a dime more really unless you had your master's. And then you had to have your master's to do another master's, right? And so it went on and on and on. And there are many, many jobs that never require one more degree, and yet their pay is commensurate upon their performance or upon their, workload or whatever it may be that they have there. So I think all of this is really important and really a good start. And so thank you so much, and to your group that worked on this. It's with much appreciation. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else up there?
Yes, Chair, Assemblywoman Hanson.
Yes, go.
Thank you.
Please.
Thank you thank you for being here. Wow, a lot of work, and greatly appreciate the information. Couple of things. You cited the teacher pay stat nationally, and I'm sorry, I don't know if it was footnoted. Can you tell me where that came from? I was looking at some of my own and just wanted to make sure I've got the right one.
This is Tammy Smithberg for the record, and I do have NDE with me. I don't remember what page that is. Can Miss Collins or Miss Charles help me, please?
Kathleen Gallon Collins for the record. Yes, the NDE, we do have that. It is in the appendix of the presentation. There are a couple slides and we do say where that information comes from. I'm trying to pull that up and read that off to you, but I don't see it at the moment. But it's in the appendix of the actual presentation. There's 2 slides there at the end that give you the data limitations and tell you where that information comes from. Whoops. It's from national studies on average teacher salaries from across the nation. And then what we did is we adjusted those salaries and ranked them by cost of living and with inflation, and came up with that ranking from 8th to 40th, I believe it was.
Okay, thank you. And yes, I see
national
the appendix, so I appreciate that because I didn't pay attention to that at first. Yeah, because I had looked, National Education Association said 2021 that average starting pay was we were 21st in the nation, and on average we were 27th. So I was distressed when I heard we're in the 40th. Now, granted, I so appreciate what teachers do, and that seems low to me. So, but with that being said, I also did notice the teacher pay gap that was cited in the National Education Association stats said that it's like 83 cents on the teacher pay gap compared to other college educated professionals. This is, I think, what distresses me. And I'm curious how, if you have a feel or a pulse from teachers, and we have some wonderful ones here that serve on this committee that I have great respect for. So maybe we could get some feedback from them as well. I am distressed that other college educated professionals make more, that the gap is significant. And then yet it seems like in our state, and it's probably very similar in other states, in order to make more, you've got to further your education, which again costs more money to do. And so I'm going to bring up the M word, merit pay. Wondering how our teachers themselves feel about, we own a private business and my plumbers don't all make the same wage. And I'm wondering, do we at some point look at that these teachers, we do pay them more if they get more education, but do we pay them more for other things? Do we compensate them? I know I have daughters who are nurses and they get certain amounts of incentives to work graveyard shifts or take on some other additional things that are more of a challenge. I have a son in the military, he gets combat pay. Have we, and I'm sure you've done this, I've only been here since 2019. At what point do we start to say, okay, our teachers are up against these sorts of things and they kind of almost max out? I have a relative who teaches in the Clark County School District at an at-risk school that's been there for years. And she does a wonderful job, but she kind of maxes out. At some point, do we visit this. And again, I'd like to hear what the teachers think about the idea of merit pay, because not all teachers are the same, just as all plumbers are not the same. Not all, everybody's different. Some people put more effort into their work. Some have conditions that are different. So thank you for that.
This is Tammy Smithberg for the record. And what I've heard in my district and what I've experienced, I can't speak for all teachers, but what I have heard and what I've experienced is we see a lot of, here's $5,000 or $10,000 for new teachers, yet you have these teachers who sit here and they don't get the 5,000 or 10, yet they're there year after year. Our principal just retired 34 years. She had been at one school. She started as a teacher and worked all the way up. I don't really know how merit pay would work, but I do know that a lot of the incentives and stuff are always like, let's throw them at the new teachers. And sometimes I think we need to throw them at the teachers that have been there.
Thank you for that. And I completely agree. And that's why I guess, and this is more rhetorical. What is the pushback on us paying teachers by merit? And maybe we can get the answer today. Maybe we don't. But I certainly do think it's worth visiting as an option.
This is Tammy Smithberg for the record. And again, just experience of my own. But I think what it comes down to is the evaluation and the evaluator and who's going to get it. And yes, the evaluation has been built by NDE and Nevada Ready, but it still can be one-sided. Or if maybe you and your administrator have a tiff, or maybe you had a bad day. It's all based on one, and I think that's the issue.
Okay, thank you. That's fair. So it's the main concern would be it's too subjective then. Okay, well, thank you so much for letting me think out loud.
Okay, yes, Senator Buck.
Thank you so much, Chair Dennis. A lot of the recommendations of the committee are valid, being an educator myself. I think sometimes we fall shy in training teachers in what the actual benefit is with the PERS system, that we have one of the best retirement systems in the country. When we are able to retire after 35 years or 30 years or 25, if you buy out 5, those that can. And I think we don't do the best with educating our educators, and especially the ones coming in or those that are maybe in the 10, 15, 20 range of years, and saying that, hey, you hold on a little bit longer and you get this. And it's at the expense of already 29.75% employer paid, state taxpayer paid. So I'm just wondering if there's been any talk about, letting and informing teachers of this amazing benefit, educators of this amazing benefit that we have in this state, that states like Tennessee, there's so many that don't have that to this level.
Tammy Smithberg for the record. I'm not quite sure what the question is.
I'm just wondering, have we spent a little time educating what currently we have as a benefit?
Again, Tammy Smithberg for the record. And again, I can only speak on what I've experienced at my district, but they bring in per representatives and they talk to us. You actually have to sign a paper saying what day you're talking to them. So I think so.
It's 29.75% per employee. So that means that, if I make, say, 100,000, I get another 29 $1,000 that is potentially going into an account that I'm going to later be able to collect in. So that information is just so valuable to teachers. And I think that oftentimes we aren't the best in our districts and in our schools at educating staff about this tremendous benefit that we are able to benefit from.
Thank you. And that's interesting. My wife's a teacher, and she was listening to a Zoom thing that was talking about the PERS retirement. And I agree. I think that's something that if they really realize that benefit, I think that's something that we have that a lot of states don't have. But I think the unfortunate thing is when they're brand new and that's when you're trying to recruit people, they don't really think about that. And that's the unfortunate thing. They don't think about the benefit that they're going to get later on. And, but as they get late, when you talk to people that have retired, they talk about how great it is. So if we could figure out a way to do that, I think that would give us something that other people don't have. Yeah. Okay. So any other questions? I appreciate, especially as a legislator, I appreciate a list of recommendations from people that are doing this stuff, right? Because, we a lot of times go to different meetings and people talk about all kinds of things, but they don't give us real specific things. So thank you so much for this great work. There's some amazing things on here. And I know that we've got legislators here that are listening and also looking for things that we can do to make education better. So thank you for bringing those forward. If we don't have anything else, thank you so much for that presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. We are going to move now to agenda item number 10, presentation concerning the roles and challenges of school counselors. And we have Keely Killian, who I believe is connected via Zoom, if I'm correct.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
You're really soft. Keep talking. Let me see if I can hear it better.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Hold on. How about now?
Oh, and there's your picture.
So I'm going to share the PowerPoint that's in front of you, and let me know if you can't see the slideshow.
Okay. Is that soft? Too soft?
Mental wellness.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if maybe BPS can boost her volume just a little bit. She's a little soft.
Can you hear me?
Yes,
Yeah.
we hear you.
Yeah, we can
Okay.
hear you. It's just a little soft, so that's fine.
Okay. I'll try to speak loud. How's that?
Yeah, and I think they just turned your volume up, so I think you're even louder now. So.
Okay. Good afternoon, Chair Dennis, Vice Chair Bilbray Axelrod, and honorable members of the committee. My name is Keely Killian. I am the current Governmental Affairs Chair for Nevada School Counselor Association, member, past president, and I also work in the school counseling department for Washoe County. My colleague, friend, and partner in crime, Kristen Barnson from Clark County School District could not be here. So I'm gonna quickly go through this presentation, and then I hope we can have a discussion on just some of the challenges that we've been facing this year. So quick review of the mental wellness and how school counselors impact that for students. What we've been working on, I think all educators, is relationships, especially during COVID and post, when kids have been back in school. This has been extremely important because they've had so many challenges. There's a really kind of famous quote from Bruce Perry, who is a leading trauma expert, that says, "The best intervention for trauma is anything that increases the strength and number of relationships in a child's life." So our school counselors have been working really hard on this these past few years. We also have been working on this hierarchy of needs. So our students as many of you know, have been through so many challenges with their families related to health and economic hardship, just their basic needs being met. And so school counselors have worked kind of on this bottom part of the hierarchy of needs to provide some of the, meet some of the basic needs to help families. And then we move into safety and belonging so that they can be successful in school. And this really has come to light these past few years,
Really?
because before we didn't have some of these challenges that we've seen during the pandemic. School counselors are part of a larger group. So we are school-based mental health professionals. We work with school counselors, school psychologists, and safe school professionals. And we all have roles and responsibilities related to supporting students. I do want to point out and thank Senator John Darrell Loop. In July 2019, we passed SB 319 that really helped to define the role and responsibilities of school psychologists, school counselors, and school social workers. So just a couple bullet points to review what we do as school counselors related to mental health. We work in 3 domains. And so just as a reminder, we promote academic, career, social, emotional success for all students. We deliver instruction that promotes positive and healthy behaviors. So things like prevention lessons, coping strategies, conflict resolution. We provide appraisal and advisement. So helping to address their academic, career, social, emotional needs, things like goal setting. We also work towards recognizing and teaching recognition of, some of the warning signs related to mental health challenges, mood changes, changes in school performance, attendance, increased discipline concerns. And then we provide short-term counseling and crisis intervention. We do focus on mental health and situational concerns. So this is, that list is long, but things like grief and difficult transitions to help support students. Just a little bit of information on, what does it take to become a school counselor? So we have a minimum of a master's degree in school counseling. For example, the current program at the universities is you need 3 years to get through the master's program, and that is full-time, like no breaks. So it's quite robust. We also have specialty training in education and mental health. We do work in a multi-tiered system of support to meet academic, career, social, emotional, and mental health needs of all students. And then we implement comprehensive counseling programs to meet the needs of all students. And this is unique to school counselors. So part of our training and building comprehensive programs is that we build programs for all students. And this is different than a lot of other school mental health professionals. So it's kind of a big job. And we have standards and competencies to help us do that. This is an example of our multi-tiered system of support framework. So at the bottom, you can see our domains that we work under: academic, college, career, social, emotional. And within social emotional is where we would also work for improving and working with students with mental health. So imagine all kinds of students and what their needs are, and trying to meet those needs within this tiered system of support. So the first tier, we're trying to provide some core foundational instruction, prevention programs. And then as we use data and other information, we move up to decide, which students are getting, which supports. Just a little bit about comprehensive school counseling programs. These are data-driven programs, and they're based on the American School Counseling Association national model. So we have standards that we use. They're called mindsets and behaviors. We have a very robust school counselor evaluation based on the framework, the national model. And some of the things that we try to accomplish are ensuring equitable access to rigorous education for all students. That includes developmentally appropriate curriculum. We use our standards within that. And one of the goals too is trying to close achievement and opportunity gaps. We look at data to make decisions, and we always try to improve student achievement, attendance, and discipline. So some of the other things that we do related to mental health is we provide a lot of referrals to our community resources and agencies where we can't provide some of those services. So we always help to do a warm handoff and bridge those supports for our families. We really try to work with students and families on an individual level to see what they need, what can they access, and how to best help them get there. We also provide training to assist teachers, administrators, families, community stakeholders about mental health concerns and challenges, and provide resources and information. So working with our stakeholders hand in hand. And then we advocate, collaborate, and coordinate with school and community stakeholders to connect the students and families to mental health services. So we work under two kind of umbrellas. We have direct services and indirect services. So our direct services are instruction in the classroom. We do facilitate small group interventions, one-on-one counseling, short-term counseling, appraisal, and advisement. So again, kind of the large group to smaller group to an individual service. And then our indirect services are collaborating and consulting with our teachers, administrators, family, community agencies to support student success. And then these are just some slides on different district resources. I'll just get through these quickly. So we've done a lot of work in different counties. I did put up some national resources for school mental health. So these are really, really important to us. We work with the American School Counselor Association. We also work with the Mental Health Technology Transfer Center. They have actually provided training and supports for our school counselors through our conferences and with the Department of Education. And then we also receive supports from the National Center for School Mental Health. So that is kind of, I wanted to get through that quickly because I know you've been here a really long time. And we have had a tremendous amount of support, I believe, from our legislators. Especially, I wanted to give a shout out to Senator Dondero Loop, who has been our biggest advocate for school mental health and school counseling. She has helped us pass much legislation related to reducing ratios, defining roles and responsibilities. The Department of Education has also adopted ratios for school mental health professionals. So we have a lot of really great things that have happened in the past few years. And we have also experienced many of the challenges that I think you have heard and will be hearing from educators just around being able to provide supports. I'm going to try to stop sharing here. So a little bit about some of the challenges that we have faced this year. Counselors have not been able to fully implement comprehensive school counseling programs. They've been a little bit underwater with kind of being in response mode to all of the student needs, just as many other educators have experienced. So what I mean by that is they've been subbing in classrooms. They don't have enough support from other school mental health professionals. For example, we have a counselor who has 730 kids and no other support. So that makes it very difficult to implement comprehensive programming. Also, we have a school mental health grant for our state. We are one of 5 states to receive a school mental health grant. So we have a lot of money to try and work on workforce development, recruitment, and retention. But for example, in speaking with UNR, they have a really robust school counseling program. They are turning away candidates because they don't have enough professors that meet the requirements for their accreditation. So now we're not able to graduate enough students to help fill some of these openings that we have. Our ratios are extremely high, and really just trying to ensure that our school counselors can provide the services that they should be providing. But we are still facing challenges like testing. They're subbing in classrooms. Their lunch duty is 2 to 3 times what a typical teacher might be. And we just don't have enough people. So I hope I gave you a little bit of a picture in a concise few minutes here.
You did, thank you.
And did I stop sharing my screen?
You did, yes, we can see you.
Okay.
So question.
Yes, sir.
I expected that one. Senator Donaldo, please.
Well, I'm going to push the kudos right back because you do the hard work. And so we thank you for doing all that with our kids as we've been in this most unusual time. And we face the same thing we just had this same discussion with the teachers, right? Not enough, large loads. How do we keep people? How do we get people into the profession? So I look forward to working with you more, and thank you for all you're doing, and give our best to Kristen. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Thank you.
Oh, good. Thank you. Anyone else up there? In Carson?
Yes, Chair, it's Assemblywoman Hanson, if I could, please.
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you for being here. I found the presentation very enlightening and also worrisome in the sense that I know that you're overburdened. I was looking at the comparisons just to get myself up to speed. I have a daughter who she's a licensed mental health professional with a private practice. And so I was trying to remember my school counselor versus school psychologist to understand, because I noticed to be a school counselor, you have to have a master's. To be a school psychologist, a master's. And of course, there's some other things in there. And again, I'll get myself in trouble. I'm thinking out loud, and that can be dangerous. But I'm trying to think outside the box. If we've got a shortage of school counselors, is there some way? I know with my daughter's master's program, the clinical hours are just extremely burdensome. They're very, very heavy. And so are we having a shortage because, and I don't want to detract from the quality of our school counselors, but is that kind of a stumbling block that there's such a requirement in these master's programs that it's harder to get? Is that what's causing us to have difficulty in the pipeline?
Keely Killian for the record. Thank you for the question. I think it could be many things. We have educators, teachers who want to get a master's in school counseling, and it makes it really hard to work and then try to go through a master's program at like a traditional university. They don't have the same flexibility as some of the online programs. And then you have to do all of those hours additionally. So it can be very challenging to get all of that done. And just the length of some of the programs, we do push potential school counseling candidates towards accredited programs because we want to make sure that they are prepared and that they meet the requirements for licensing. Some of the things that we have talked about, Kristen and I and other members of NVSCA, is looking at alternative routes where, is it possible for, counselors to start without having some of those classes and do provisional licensing, right? Where we can get them in and put them with supportive teams. We would never put them in a situation where they're alone and then they work towards some of those other requirements. I think we are working on some things with licensing through the Department of Education now for interns to get in and start working and like getting paid again with some of the supportive teams. But it is a long haul to get some of these degrees and the amount of hours and the kind of hours that you need. And so, yes, I think it is challenging and it may turn some potential candidates away for all of the professions, school mental health professions.
Well, thank you for
And
that.
this is not new, a shortage. Yeah, thank you.
And I'm glad to hear certainly that, you know, you're way ahead of my thought processes, that you guys are working on this to find some creative ways maybe to enhance, especially teachers that want to do this, for them to get some sort of credit for the experience they have been with students. And anyway, thank you. That gives me some hope that you're certainly working hard, as we've heard from Senator Dondero Loop, and appreciate your efforts. So thank you for that information.
Thank you. Other questions? Yes, Assemblywoman Thomas.
And thank you, Chair Dennis. And thank you for the presentation. Really, I'm very impressed with the information that you shared with us. Actually, I don't really have a question, but I was hoping to get your feedback on presenting this committee with the solutions, you know, because it's always great to hear what the problem is, but to get written down solutions, what you think and what your colleagues believe that could be the answer to some of these trying times, especially, you know, the double duty and triple duties that you're actually doing, and how to create a pipeline. If it's using those teachers that want to advance into counseling, that would be great. But I would love to see that in written form so that, you know, when we talk about it, we can go back to it if that's possible.
Keely Killian for the record. Thank you so much for that information. I think we can come up with some information or proposals that would still help to increase workforce and turn out really high quality candidates for school counseling. You have to be prepared to work in this job. So I'd be happy to work with NVSCA and my colleagues because we have been having these conversations, and there are states and districts around the country who have been working on these things. And so we are not alone. We have a really large support group, especially with the American School Counseling Association, where we might be able to come up with some information that is helpful to the committee.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
All right. Any other questions? Okay. Thank you very much for being with us this afternoon. We will go on to our last item on the agenda, well, second to last item, which is public comment. I mentioned earlier that we would have additional public comment. Just want to, as a reminder, we are limiting public comment to 3 minutes per person, and there's various ways that you can also submit public comment. So do we have anyone here in Las Vegas wishing to give public comment? You do, please come forward. Not seeing anyone coming forward here. How about in Carson City? Do we have anyone coming forward up there?
Nope.
Okay, thank you. BPS, do we have anybody online?
Thank you, Chair Dennis. The public line is open and working. However, there are no callers at this time.
Okay, I think I want to wait just a minute because I think there's a 30-second delay or whatever it is. And since we didn't have comment for them to be able to call in, let's be on hold for just a minute.
Thank you, Chair. Broadcast standing by.
Okay, BPS, do we have anyone?
Thank you, Chair Dennis. The public line is still open and working. However, we have no callers at this time.
Okay, so we'll go ahead and close public comment at this time. And just a couple of closing remarks. I appreciate all the folks that presented today, and we got some really good information. We've gotten some amazing information on all the different presentations that we've had so far this year. An archived version of today's meeting will be available online. And I would like to remind all of you that the work of the session for the committee, that the work session for this committee currently scheduled August 17th. We might need to adjust that, but right now we're scheduled for August 17th. And we are still asking though, any recommendations for committee action be submitted in writing no later than Thursday, June 30th. And please see the solicitation of recommendations that is posted on the committee's webpage for detailed information about submitting those recommendations. So we do want to hear from you. We've had a lot of different presentations and want to make sure that that if you do have a request of this committee, that we can take that up in our that we could consider for taking up in our meeting at the work session in August. So right now, our next meeting has been rescheduled, and it's going to be on Friday, July 29th. And we needed to make a change. There's a lot of things going on in July, so our next meeting will be July 29th. With that, I have no further items to come before us at this time, so we are adjourned.
Thank you very much, Ms. Way, for your comments.
You're welcome.
We will, if you can hang out there, we may have questions for you once we get through everyone. Next, I am going to go over to Mr. Marcus Arroyo, head football coach at UNLV. He should be there in Las Vegas as well. Go ahead, Mr. Arroyo, when you are ready.
Is that on there correctly? Got it. Perfect. Marcus Arroyo, UNLV head football coach. I'm going to share a similar sentiment in regards to just a background real quick, and then really kind of the I think the overall experience as a coach in this landscape is probably the thing that's most beneficial. I don't pretend to know the minutia behind the scenes, but I think it is imperative. And I think that candidly, this has probably been one of the best things I've been a part of in what we're dealing with right now, because I haven't had, we as coaches, we don't have this opportunity to sit behind the shades and to be able to navigate it, let alone have a conversation about it before it gets put in front of us often. So I'm thankful for these opportunities to do this. And I think a big shout out to Eric Nepaceno at UNLV, because he's been forward thinking and progressive in providing these information to us as coaches and staffs and our landscape. And I'm really appreciative of that. So a quick background and just kind of give you an idea of how I've transcended through and have a view and vantage of college athletics. I did play college athletics. I was a 4-year quarterback at San Jose State University in this conference on the West Coast in California. I transitioned out of my playing experience directly into coaching as a graduate assistant. And since 2002, that's what I've been doing. So 20 years in this industry as a coach, as a GA, as a coordinator, as an assistant head coach, from HBCU all the way through to G5 to Power 5. I've been in the NFL also, and I've seen NFL drafts. I've seen many layers that our sport has at every level. And I've done that from coast to coast, from California to Mississippi to Oklahoma to Texas to Wyoming to Nevada to Florida, and the list goes on. And so I try to use as much of that environmental experience as I can to kind of make the best judgments and views of what goes on in our world as I can, especially with our student athletes. But it also has a direct impact on our families and the cities we live in and the places we do. So that's kind of, I think, what I've tried to illuminate a little bit more as I've gotten into this really second year of head coaching. And I think that piece is a lot to swallow, let alone the fact that I don't pretend to know how these things are made, let alone did I spend 20 years studying that space. So, there's a few things that I wrote down, and I've spoke with as many people as I could in regards to what they think we think of, in quotes, what we think of NIL as a coaching staff and the coaching profession. I can't speak for everybody, but I think there's a few things that stick out. The first off is the reality of the profile of what NIL does to a university. And I think that's has been talked about with everyone who's really done a fantastic job of helping me learn a little bit more. But the profile of a university is directly affected by this right now as a college coach. All our recruits, all our parents, all the conferences, all the conversations around where this will put your school is an effective conversation and is a real conversation. Are you there with the big boys? Are you a minor league, major league player? And I use those terms loosely just to kind of define, are you guys in an NIL space? What is this? What is that? And we don't have those answers, but it is something that I think, as I think through how it can be advantageous in recruiting and developing and being able to have the resources to compete with whoever that is, we believe that may be. NIL is a player in that type of definition and profiling your school, whether it be a conference or whether it be your school, whether it be again, one versus one or one versus many. And so that's probably the first thing I wrote down. The second piece would be, I wrote down community and kind of connectivity to our school, our community, our city, our sponsors, charities. I mean, I think being able to have some of the things that I've seen and across the country, connect our players with certain people in our community and certain landscapes, certain charities, certain sponsorships, communication. I think there are definitely some guardrails missing that I think we can put our arms around, but I think there's a huge piece that I think can be really positive to that. I think that our players and people are able to have conversations with people that we actually, when we recruit them, promise them that those are available to them. I'm going to come to this school because I have school A, because I've got the ability in this landscape or this environment to meet alumni who can affect my academic or my social career after football. Those sometimes are really prior to, that those are protected in a lot of ways, since I was a player moving forward to now, and how we could actually get those experiences and those relationships built, because they're so guarded and for the right reasons. But I think that the NIL provides now, and I do think that there's a piece to it that can be advantageous to our guys meeting certain business people or providing themselves in certain charities or sponsorships that illuminate our city, our state, our town, our whatever, your school and your brand. And I think that there is a positive if you can put the guardrails that can obviously protect us from all the educational pieces that so many people before me have talked about, which I do believe are tough. Team building is probably the third piece. After I wrote down, profile, connectivity, I wrote down team building. That's one of the things as a coach, and this is the experience that many of us have. You're always trying to find avenues where you can get your guys together. Now, it's inherent that the time is hard for that, but there's also resources that reduce those options for us to be able to put players together. One of the things that I've seen across the country that I think is another reason is I think that the NIL packages or deals that you've seen where they've allowed the quarterback to take out the entire O-line, and a certain individual isn't the only person to take advantage of this package, where it can be a group deal, allows for some team building between your players that you have to do as a coach. I've got to take an incidental meal and go take them to my house and take them to meet and just get out of the office or go to a local restaurant and allow guys to be together. That's not so task oriented. And the nature of our world is so task oriented because of the time. To have opportunities where that collective or that grouping or that NIL deal allows them to do it. I think there is a piece to that I thought is also really a cool setup, that deal associates multiple players and not just one. I think there could be something. I think there's definitely something to that, having been in a locker room and been around a team. The recruiting piece goes without saying. That'd be the fourth piece. The recruiting element to it is the lifeblood of our program, academically, socially, and athletically. I think that's inherent in what we do, is recruiting the right people and that we want in our program, the character and whatever it may be that you have on your core values at each university. The recruitment of those student athletes is now directly affected. And I think that the ability for NIL and anything we can be able to talk about helps us with that recruitment. It can also hurt you in regards to the other people. That goes without saying. We've hit that one, over the head a bunch today. And then the last piece I wrote down is now a fact of the world we live in, and that's retention. And that is new. That piece of it is new to the 20 years I've been a part of it, and the 20 years I've been a part of college football right now and pro football. Recruiting is at the forefront of everything we think about every day, is to get the right roster, the right people, the right locker room lineup. And keeping those people now is become the retention of that locker room, and that roster has been at jeopardy since this comes up. I can't speak on exactly, individual cases, but I know that's part of it. We've kind of hit that already today, but that is probably the 5 things that I felt like coming in here and speaking as candidly and authentically about just an experience as a coach that I'm seeing this landscape be affected by. Those are the things that I think are where I'm seeing as a coach the most effect. And I think that they can be, if done the right way, and then the challenges can be met right on. I think there can be some really advantageous things to a university, to a brand, to a city, to a state in regards to how you do it.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Arroyo. We appreciate that. Hang out a bit. We will see if we have some questions for you. Next, we are going to hear from Julia Nixon, a student athlete at UNLV in women's track and field. Ms. Julia is joining us by Zoom. So Ms. Nixon, please go ahead whenever you're ready.
Julia Nixon, for the record. I am a track and field athlete at UNLV. I am going into my 3rd year. I am an economics and real estate major, and I also plan on going to law school. So that's just a bit about me. I'm just going to give a little bit of an overview of my experience in the NIL space as a student athlete. So when it came out in July that was happening, we kind of got an overview of the most obvious rules. We're obviously new to this too, but no pay for play, has to represent the values of the university, things like that. We, as a university, use NoCap as our third party to disclose our deals. So when we agree to work with a company, we go into the NoCap website, we enter what our contract is, what we are providing for the company, and anything we're getting in return for that. But in regard to like team issued gear, we're a Nike school at UNLV, so any gear we wear during competition still has to be Nike regardless of any deals you sign. In my experience, typically student athletes reach out to companies, or the companies have initiatives for student athletes. I know a popular one among athletes at UNLV is Liquid IV. They have an initiative for student athletes. So you basically go into their website, you enter your information, they review kind of your social media profiles, and they get back to you on whether or not they want to work with you. Companies typically offer product, money, discounts, things like that. In my experience, product is the most common among people I've talked to on my team. As student athletes, we try to pursue deals that we're interested in promoting or align with our goals or values. Some of the benefits I've seen from it is we get access to products that maybe we wouldn't buy because they're out of our budget or things like that. So it's been helpful to have things like Liquid IV that are a little more expensive than other things we would typically buy, but it's really helpful. And I know working with them, I just got sent a larger package that I get to share with my team. So not only does it benefit me, but it also benefits my teammates as well. Like I said earlier, most deals are done through social media. I would say Instagram and TikTok are probably the two most popular platforms that people promote things on. I think it has also been a good resume booster, as most of us as student athletes don't have the opportunity to work part-time, full-time, just due to the amount of hours we're putting into our sport and class and homework. So it's been a good resume booster for me personally. I know I am in the application process for a job in social media for a fairly big company, and being able to say that I've worked or had experience in making NIL deals and looking over contracts myself, that has really boosted my resume. So I'm getting experience that I probably wouldn't get if I didn't have NIL, just due to the fact that it's harder to work with sports. Some takeaways I've had: the contracts we have to look through, they aren't extremely complicated, but it's been nice to have exposure to that space just because I want to go to law school. And so it's been nice to kind of get a preview of what looking over contracts is like. And it's just given us exposure to things we wouldn't normally get exposure to. I think for everyone, in my experience and other athletes I've talked to, navigating the process was a bit challenging early on, just because we were under the impression that there were going to be consequences or things like that if we didn't do it correctly. So we were pretty worried about like making sure everything was following the rules to a T. But as we like continued to make deals and things like that, it just got easier. The NoCap platform we use is fairly simple to disclose deals. I think it's important that we continue to educate athletes on the rules and things like taxes. I think our compliance department has done a really good job in presenting to us and telling us the rules and giving us all the information that they have so far. I think going forward as a state, it would be nice to just have some more specific guidelines as to what is and isn't allowed, because there's a lot of judgment calls and people are, in my experience, at least my teammates, are being kind of on the safe side with that, which is good, but it would just be nice to have a little bit more strict guidelines just to provide us with more information on that. I think it's also been good networking opportunities. That's another thing we miss out on a lot with not working due to sports. is being able to network. And I know myself and my teammates, as well as athletes in other sports, we've networked and gotten deals and said, oh, you might be good for this deal as well. So it's just given us a lot of experience that we wouldn't normally get being athletes. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Ms. Nixon, for your presentation. Next, we're going to go to, and please hang out in case we have some questions there on Zoom. Next, we're going to go to Austin Ortega, also on Zoom. Mr. Ortega, go ahead when you are ready.
Hello, my name is Austin Ortega, for the record, student athlete at the University of Nevada, Reno. A little background on me is I'm a long snapper at the University of Nevada, Reno, and I'm originally from San Antonio, Texas. I just recently graduated with a bachelor's degree in journalism with a minor in sports management and looking to pursue my master's degree in journalism this upcoming fall. With the new sports management program that has just been introduced at our university, I've learned a ton about NIL through my classes, just because it has been the hot topic for the last year. For me, I would like to say I'm in favor of NIL for student athletes. From my perspective, I'm a current walk-on at the football team and receive no money from the university to play the sport I've loved ever since I could walk. I think the NIL rule can give players like me, being a walk-on, a chance to make money playing their respective sports when they receive no money from the university. For me, I've been timid to enter the NIL space due to the fact I still don't know a whole bunch. And knowing how to capitalize on opportunities that the NIL entails. For me, NIL is about building a brand for yourself. Without a brand, there's no way to market yourself for potential NIL opportunities. From my personal NIL experience, I have partnered with Barstool Sports and Liquid IV as well. And that requires minimal action on my part. For Barstool Sports, I received free merchandise for putting the phrase Barstool athlete in my social media bio. And for Liquid IV, they send me their product for posting their product twice a month on my social media pages. When NIL first came out last July, I thought companies would be coming after us student athletes for deals, but seemed to realize that it was the other way around, where we were trying to target companies that we could market for. In my personal opinion, I think student athletes should be able to benefit from school profits from sponsorships such as Adidas, Gatorade, Powerade, Nike, and Under Armour. I know Adidas is going to be rolling out a sponsorship or partnership opportunity with schools that are sponsored by Adidas for their student athletes. Likewise, the University of Nevada, Reno have a contract with Adidas worth over $900,000 per year. And we as athletes don't see any of that money, in which we can only wear Adidas products during an athletic competition. And just to say, our athletes seem to be undervalued in NIL deals because we don't really have as big of a reach as bigger schools such as Texas A&M and Alabama do. We see no local companies and alumni stepping up and reaching out to help benefit the student athletes through NIL endorsements. And I think that's something that UNLV, I don't know how it is down there, but for Nevada, I think local companies could do better by reaching out to the student athletes and helping them capitalize on NIL opportunities. And that's all I have to say.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Ortega. Please hang out right there on Zoom. Next, we will hear from Hannah Smart, student athlete in women's track and field. Please go ahead, Ms. Smart. And I hope I'm saying that correctly.
Hello, it's okay. My name is Hannah Smart, for the record. I don't have too many brand deals or anything. I just have smaller ones such as like Barstool, Activewear, and Notorious Vintage. But basically, once this NIL law passed, I knew there was going to be a big overreaction, and a lot of athletes, we're going to be bombarded with like offers and stuff. But I think what's happening is it's causing athletes to almost kind of be used by brands for free advertising, because what's happening, like for example, Barstool, you put them in your bio, you post them for free clothes, and that's all you really get out of it. And I would say that athletes are having to add the title influencer to their like student athlete title, but the issue is we don't know exactly what to do, and brands don't really know what to do. So we're the ones having to take the lead and just hope that we're not like breaking any rules or anything. So I think educating would be helpful. I know that it's heavily based upon how many followers we have. For example, one of my deals, they were like, okay, you have between 5,000 and 10,000 followers, so you get this PR package. Whereas people with more followers would get a bigger package, I guess you could say, or maybe even paid. However, coming from a smaller school, I think that NIL as a whole is really good, because even though we don't have Cade McNamara from Michigan or any huge names, we get to make an impact on our community, which I think is really important, especially for Nevada, because we have a lot of potential to become more of a college town and get more like donations and get more money through our community and like getting to know them. So that's all, and I hope that was helpful.
Yes, thank you, Ms. Smirt. I hope I said it better that time. Thank you so much for that. Please hang out. We may have some questions for you. Next, we're going to go to Madison Marr, who is also a student in women's soccer. Ms. Marr, please go ahead.
Hi, I am Madison Marr. I'm on the women's soccer team at UNR. A little bit about me. I honestly have never had a job other than babysitting here and there growing up. And then I got to college, and obviously because we were so busy, don't have a lot of time to have a job. It's very rare you hear someone who does. And I think with the new NIL deals, it's made it a little easier to make some money and receive some products. However, I do think it is nice, but like those big athletes or big schools, they have a little bit of an advantage because some of these companies aren't reaching out to us directly. So we have to reach out to them. And when we do that, they're most likely going to take or wanting to take a person who goes to a bigger school over someone who's going to go to UNR. And I do think that is a little bit of a disadvantage to going to not as big of schools. I work with lifestyle brands, I Want Organics, and Barstool. I promote them through social media mostly. And what I think is good about that on the plus side of this is with me doing this, a lot of people on my teams or friends who go to the schools have reached out to these companies and have also like bandwagoned off of what I've done and will help promote these brands as well. And then they get NIL deals. So I do think that there is a lot of good points to the NIL deals, way for us to make money. It gets their products out there. It gets the name of our schools out there to kind of encourage people. But I do think, like I said, with us not being a really big school, it makes it a little harder to not get like the big brands like Adidas or I don't know, just a big brand to want to sponsor us or give us a deal. So that's my personal experience.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Marr. And that rounds out our presenters for this section. It was really important to us that we hear from our student athletes and our coaches who are actually in the midst of navigating all of this. And I want to commend and congratulate all of our student athletes, for the work that you're doing. You sound like you guys are all thriving academically and with your athletics. I have a question, and either one of you can answer it, or maybe one or two people can respond, and you can just show us your hand so we'll know who to call on, so everyone doesn't turn on their microphone and start speaking at once. But I am curious about the types of deals you all are seeing. And I hear, I've heard a couple of the same companies kind of circulate there, but are you seeing primarily between you and your friends deals where there's just a product offer, or are you actually seeing deals where you are able to earn some actual cash? And then the second part of that question is going to be, with those the time commitment, the difference in the time commitment between the possible deals that offer you cash versus the deals that are offering you products. And I see Ms. Smirt's hand up first. So go ahead, Ms. Smirt, and then let me just check, anyone else want to answer that? Okay. All right, Ms. Smirt.
Okay, I'm Hannah Smirt for the record. So in terms of the time commitment for the different deals, obviously it depends, but I wouldn't say there's a ton of a difference. However, the deals I'm doing, a lot of them are product based, but then I also can make commissions. So I will get a code for my vintage deal, I have a code, and whoever uses my code, I get 15% commission of whatever they got. And that compared to my product deals, I personally don't have a different time commitment. It's just a lot of work on social media sometimes, and you have to be consistent with your posting to make sure you have enough followers and stuff like that. But also I don't have any crazy big deals, so I'm sure those would be more time consuming. But yeah, for me, it's just mainly 15% commission or product.
Okay, great. Thank you. Just want to check to make sure, did anyone else want to chime in on that? Any of our student athletes? Nope. Okay, so moving on to more questions. Do we have a question here in Carson City? Nope, not in Carson City. Vice Chair, do you have any questions for our coaches or athletes in Las Vegas?
Thanks. I have a couple questions. So what I heard from the student athletes, and I really appreciate you coming here and sharing your story with us. My question, I think what I heard from you, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is that you would like to have more education on how NIL works and what the opportunities are for you out there, that you really felt like in many cases you had to find those opportunities. Is that true or not true? Raise your hand if it's true, I guess. So it's not true. I mean, I can't see, Chair, so.
Okay,
yeah.
My apologies, Vice Chair. I was getting a note. So let's do this. Student athletes, physically raise your hand so we could actually see it.
So you would like more education from your schools? No. Yes.
It looks like it's a yes from here. From Carson City, it looks like they're saying yes, they would like more education on NIL deals and contracts and things.
Okay, thank you. And then coach, our football coach. I'm sorry. So I really appreciated your points that you brought up, and I'm just wondering, in your athletes, and one of the ones that you brought up was recruiting, and I think I've been very consistent every meeting bringing up the recruiting thing because I think it's huge in this, and so I would just like to know from you if it has affected your recruiting thus far, even though we're in the baby stages.
Marcus Arroyo, UNLV football. Yeah, the reason it's affected is because it's been a conversation topic every single time. I shouldn't say every single, a majority of the time it's going to be there. whether it be the parent or the coach or the player, specifically I don't want to cross this bridge now, but especially in this transfer portal world, this is a whole nother category of issues that we're dealing with, is because this immediate eligibility process now, and it's got some guardrails behind it coming up, but that part has in itself created a conversation in regards to immediate eligibility, that they want to know that they're basing where they go based on all these factors, and one of them being an NIL deal. It probably will be hard to tell at this point, because I think it's too green to know how it's going to really affect all our rosters longitudinally, whether it be in conference or across state, because I don't know that yet. But I think looking back, we'll know a little bit more. Hey, did NIL really affect us or not? Currently, just speaking for us, again, and because we don't know what these deals are, the only way the most common way it is affecting us is we're having to say we are progressive in our communication. We're diligent in finding out more and more about our athletes and communicating with our athletic department and then the third parties that they've included in it, and getting and staying ahead of and communicating effectively our NIL deals that are available in our town and in our city. So I think what we've done is we've positioned ourselves in a positive light to these athletes and said, we are a believer and a supporter of this. And I think that's helped us as much as anything. And I think that's probably the dialogue that I believe has affected our recruiting class thus far, is that we've told them we are in support. We do have people who are very progressive and aggressive, thinking about these things the right way. And our town is one that we believe at a market value, let alone our state, that we can really battle it out if we do things the right way with anybody.
Okay, great. And CSN, have you experienced any of the same kinds of challenges or obstacles, or maybe it's all good?
Let me speak on my coaching experience first. Collegiately, on the track and field side of things, obviously track and field is kind of the low fruit on the tree when it comes to NIL. However, I prided myself on recruiting, the nation's top athletes, and we went against the best of the best. But in this NIL space, it's difficult when other schools that are Power 5 schools have more to give, more to offer. And truth be told, they are throwing out the NILs and the opportunities that they're not supposed to use in recruiting to win these athletes over. And that makes it challenging. Now that I'm in the community college space, and we rely a lot on our donor participation and to keep the lights on, I think it's even more challenging. I don't know, I'm new to the program, obviously, and I don't know how many of our student athletes have NIL deals at the moment. But I would imagine that, in competing for student athletes in any space with organizations that give that as an opportunity, it's going to be challenging for sure.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Urban?
Just real quickly, for the record, that was.
Sorry, Chair.
No problem. That was Ms. Wade for the record.
Sorry.
No problem. Okay, go ahead.
Somebody better
carry on, Vice Chair.
Dexter, thank you. Dexter Irvin for the record. Somebody's got a teacher, right? Yes, I don't know. I'll do it. Okay. Coach Roy, thank you for being here, and Yvonne as well. How much influence does this third party provider have in the formation of these deals? Does that make sense? Do you see that? In other words, some schools have a Nike deal, so student athletes can look at that maybe as better than a champion school, if there are such a thing. And so these third-party providers, as they come into being, and as they come, are there the elite third-party providers out there that are leading the way for some student athletes to develop these deals, or is it just it's so new still that we don't know? Maybe. Thank you.
Marcus Royal, UNLV. I think the one thing that we're having a hard time with, and someone mentioned this earlier, and I agree with it. I'm going to get that in a second. We publicly know our Nike deal as a coach. like we signed into that. Like I can share that information. I know how many jerseys we get. We know what deal, how it compares to everybody else. That's a dialogue I can put into a PowerPoint and a sales pitch into whatever it may be in recruiting. I can't do that. We have no, we are disconnected from that. And I say that because I couldn't tell you the third party organization or structure, or I can tell you who they are and I know what to say and I know who to report to. But that's a piece that I think is missing. And I don't know that. I don't know what, like when we had the first conversation, and this was early on, and influencer was what part of this conversations, and no cap and all these third parties that were party entities that everyone were getting with. Again, because we weren't, privy to really getting into the meat and potatoes of it, and it was because it was so new. Shoot, I'd be lying to say that we were able to even have a really good pulse for it, other than the fact that we tried to get as much information we can to educate our staff, get educated by our own staff and our athletic department to be able to then tell our recruits and student athletes, here's the formula we're going to use. We believe in it for this way, and we move forward with that. So I'd be lying to say I know that. Yeah.
Dexter, everything, and thank you, Coach. Yvonne, didn't we kind of go through this with track and field early on? We started paying track and field athletes. First, the payments went to the organizations, and then we started paying track and field athletes early. Didn't we kind of go through this in the late 90s, early 80s?
Wow, I don't know.
Yvonne Wade, for the record, I wasn't born yet. No, just kidding. Yes, I remember those discussions of payments for athletes in all sports. Actually, I've been witness to a lot of those situations. But the things that boosters did privately that sometimes weren't so private now are legal, in some kind of way. So as Coach Arroyo said, we need to set boundaries to some degree, maybe not so much that it's a headache for compliance officers and institutions, but to give, our student athletes some guidance on what they can and can't do, and the collectives on what they can and can't do, and the companies that are funding these initiatives can and can't do, to give some guidance to everybody so we know how to maneuver, how to stay competitive. I would love the state to be as competitive as Florida's and the Arkansas's and all these other states. We're not quite there yet, but as long as we're doing it the right way, I think it's really important for these student athletes.
We're good, Chair.
All right, thank you. Do we have any questions from members that are on Zoom?
I have one question, Chair.
Go ahead.
For the record, Eric Nepomuceno, UNLV. Coach Arroyo, Coach Wade, thank you for joining us. I think you've seen that we've been able as a committee to get a great cross-section of student athlete voices as well as administrator voices. I feel like the coach's voice is one where we've lacked. Maybe you can talk to us a little bit about, we've heard the lack of involvement and certainly sometimes being in the dark. And that obviously is by design. I'd be interested to hear, Coach Arroyo, your thought in terms of how involved coaches should be in the NIL landscape, and then certainly Coach Wade, yours as well.
Marcus Arroyo, UNLV. Eric, I think that's probably the best thing about this right now, and is conversations like this that would allow for those type of measures and those things to be put forth, because I think it's really hard to be in this position in a landscape that we're at with student athletes and their parents and the people who support programs and the businesses and stuff, and to not have that enough information. If you look back, or if I just think of myself in 20 years, what things that I'm not able to talk about in respect to my profession and the ability to recruit, develop, and support student athletes or young men, or in the NFL, or whatever it may be, the separating factor right now is my ability to articulate and understand and be educated in NIL. And I think that piece is probably the piece that me and you've talked about candidly about where those things can go. And I think you're going to go down a slippery slope, and someone mentioned it in here, but I don't know if that's a negative, is that there's got to be there's the difference in college and pro right now in this avenue that we're going down is the agents and the antitrust and those things that help these measures that really are the things that you can articulate in an NFL draft room or the NFL boardroom or an NFL player PA, that they all know there's a handbook for it. And then that makes it, that's kind of what we're talking about is where is that with this? And we don't have that yet. So I think the ability to develop that this is the most critical conversation I've been a part of, candidly. And for that, I'm really thankful. But I think for us to be involved, and someone mentioned earlier, I don't remember who, is a really important piece. We're the one having the conversation. We're the ones they're coming to. And we're the ones we spend a lot of time with. We're the ones who we sit in their living room. And I think to be able to have those conversations to the best of our ability without having to just close the door is not one I don't think is very advantageous to what we're asked to do. And that's the athlete experience and developing young athletes. So that's my 2 cents.
Yvonne Wade for the record. I think if I was still a coach, I wouldn't want to be in that space other than to direct my student athletes to the resources that our university and our department provided. My job would be to coach and to develop student athletes in the classroom and on the field. And then every institution should have the resources to help our student athletes navigate that the best way possible. I think my stance is that it should be clear across the board. I think regardless of what institution you're at, what level you're at, fair is fair. One institution should not be able to do something that another isn't. And I think that's where the challenge is.
Okay, is that good, Eric?
One more question down here, sir. Chair.
Yes, go ahead. Well, I'm sorry, 1 second. Let me confirm that Eric was done with his questions. Yes, shake your head.
Yes.
No, not, okay, perfect, thank you. I can see you, there we go. Okay, and now we can continue on back to Las Vegas, go ahead.
Thank you, Dexter Irvin, for the record. I would like to ask the student athletes, and just to kind of change the landscape a little bit. We've talked earlier about students possibly becoming employees of the institutions. Have you thought about that at all? And if you're early in your career, which I'm not sure where all of you are, but if you had, if you were, it may be not a fair question. Have you ever even thought what that would be like to be classified as an employee, to have employee benefits, employee responsibilities, but also have the ability to be hired and fired basically as an employee? Does that occur to you? Does that scare you? Is that even part of the thought process right now of students that are in the system moving ahead?
Yes, Mr. Ortega, go ahead and answer the question. State your name first.
For the record, Austin Ortega, University of Nevada. Yeah, so actually in one of my sports management classes, we did have to write an essay, whether pros and cons on being, whether student athletes should become an employee or not. My opinion, I would say I'd rather us not become employees, even though we do work employee hours. 40 plus hours a week, sometimes, depending on what part of the season we're on. But I think that us receiving tuition is far more greater than receiving employee benefits, in my opinion.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to chime in on that? Any other student? No? Okay. All right, Mr. Irvin, anything else? Nope. Okay. Any other questions going around? Speak now or forever hold your peace until the next meeting? Mm-hmm. No. Okay, good deal. Well, I want to thank both our coaches and students for participating in the meeting. Your perspective is extremely valuable and important to us, and will help us as we make some recommendations moving forward. In fact, with that being said, I am going to see if there are any thoughts or recommendations that you all, from your experience, would like the committee to consider as we make recommendations to the larger education committee. So I will first ask our coaches there in Las Vegas if there are any recommendations that they foresee, and then I will come to our students on Zoom. Vice Chair, I'm depending on your eyes to tell me if they are still in the room or if there's anything going on.
I'm sorry, Chair. There are no recommendations from the floor here.
Okay, thank you so much. And then here on Zoom with our students, are there any things that, any recommendations or things that you'd like us to consider moving forward as we make sure that we have the right program in place here? None? And that's cool, no problem. Thank you again, everyone, for your participation. Keep being great at school. Enjoy your summers if you get them, to have a little bit of break. I want to thank all of our presenters who have participated today. It was great to hear each unique perspective on name, image, and likeness of student athletes. We are next going to move on to agenda item 7, which is public comment. Let's see here. So as we go into public comment, if you are listening online and would like to provide public comment, please call 669-900-6833, then enter meeting ID 862-1091-7091 and press pound. I will start again with public comment here in Carson City. Seeing no one in Carson City, we will move on to Las Vegas. Vice Chair, I'm depending on your eyes for Las Vegas.
Thank you. There is no one in Las Vegas.
Thank you, Vice Chair. And BPS staff, are there any callers on the line that would like to make public comment?
Thank you, Chair. Your line is open and working, but you have no callers at this time.
Awesome. Thank you. Well, we're going to move right on to agenda item 8, which is adjournment. Thank you to all the members, staff, and everyone who presented and participated today. An archive video of today's meeting will be available online. Our next and currently last meeting will be on Thursday, June 23rd at 1 p.m. This will be our work session meeting. Members, if you have any additional recommendations based on what you've heard and you've been thinking about over the last few meetings, please go ahead and email those into us, and we will consider those things at our next meeting on June 23rd. My staff will be reaching out to everyone as the date approaches. Thank you very much, and please enjoy your Thursday and enjoy the holiday weekend. Be safe and have fun.